You think he disappeared. You think silence means surrender. You think because he stopped explaining, he stopped caring. But let me tell you something. Silence is not absence. Silence is preparation. When a man stops talking, stops reacting, stops probing, that's not weakness. That's transformation. And tonight I'm here to tell you he didn't move on, he leveled up. Silence has always been misunderstood. In a world addicted to noise, announcements, and constant updates, silence gets mistaken for weakness, for retreat, for losing ground. People assume that if you're not speaking, you must have nothing to say. If you're not reacting, you must be hurting. But that assumption comes from shallow thinking. Silence is not the absence of strength. It is often the evidence of it. Silence is what happens when a person stops wasting energy and starts preserving power. When he chose silence, it wasn't because he had no answers. It was because he no longer owed explanations. Every word costs energy. Every reaction drains focus. At some point, he realized that not every situation deserves a response, and not every opinion deserves a reply. Silence became a filter. It separated what mattered from what didn't. And once that filter was in place, clarity followed. People often talk when they are uncertain. They over-explain when they seek approval. They argue when they feel threatened. Silence, on the other hand, signals self-control. It shows restraint. It shows confidence. It says, I know who I am, and I don't need to prove it out loud. That kind of silence unsettles people. Not because it's empty, but because it's full of intention. In silence, the mind sharpens. Without constant external noise, inner dialogue becomes clearer. That's where decisions are made. That's where priorities realign. Silence forces reflection, and reflection exposes truth. It reveals mistakes without excuses. It highlights patterns without denial. That process is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Growth doesn't happen while you're constantly talking. It happens when you're listening. There is also discipline in silence. It takes strength to hold your tongue when misunderstood. It takes maturity to walk away without delivering a final speech. Silence demands patience, and patience builds control. Instead of reacting impulsively, he learned to pause. Instead of speaking from emotion, he learned to wait for wisdom. And that pause, that space between impulse and action, changed everything. Silence is also protection. Not everyone needs access to your thoughts, your plans, your next move. When everything is spoken, nothing is guarded. Silence creates boundaries. It keeps vision safe from doubt and goals safe from sabotage. While others were busy announcing what they were going to do, he was quietly doing it. No distractions, no outside pressure, just focus. And here's the truth most people miss. Silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It often means everything is happening. Foundations are being laid. Strength is being built. Direction is being refined. Silence is not the end of the story. It's the part where the story gets serious. Real growth has never been a public event. It doesn't happen on stages, in comment sections, or under applause. Growth happens where nobody is watching, where there is no validation, no encouragement, and no guarantee of recognition. The crowd only witnesses success, never the process. That's why most people misunderstand growth. They think it's loud, visible, and celebrated. But the truth is, growth is quiet, lonely, and often uncomfortable. When he stepped away from the crowd, it wasn't arrogance, it was necessity. Too many voices confuse direction. Too many opinions dilute focus. Everyone has advice, but very few have understanding. In isolation, there is no pressure to perform, no need to impress, and no temptation to pretend. That's where honesty lives. And honesty is the foundation of real improvement. Away from the crowd, excuses don't survive. There's no one to blame, no audience to convince. Every weakness becomes impossible to ignore. Every flaw stands exposed. That's why most people avoid solitude. It forces accountability. But he leaned into it. He understood that if he could face himself without distractions, he could fix what the world never saw but always felt. Growth also requires repetition, and repetition is boring. It's doing the same thing again and again without praise. It's failing quietly and correcting privately. The crowd doesn't clap for practice. The crowd only shows up for performance. So while others were busy being seen, he was busy becoming better. Every unseen hour added weight to his discipline and depth to his character. There is a certain freedom that comes with being unknown for a while. No expectations, no labels, no pressure to live up to past versions of yourself. In that space, he was able to rebuild, stronger, sharper, more intentional. He wasn't chasing attention anymore. He was chasing alignment. And alignment only happens when the noise fades. The crowd often rewards comfort, not growth. It celebrates familiarity, not transformation. When you change, people resist. When you outgrow a version they recognize, they question you. That's another reason growth happens in isolation. It protects momentum. It allows change to mature without interference. By the time the crowd notices, the roots are already deep. And while it may look like disappearance from the outside, from the inside it's construction. Habits are being formed. Standards are being raised. Limits are being broken quietly. Growth away from the crowd doesn't seek approval. It builds resilience. And resilience, once formed, doesn't need permission to stand tall. There comes a moment when emotion stops being a guide and starts being a liability. Emotion is powerful, but it's unstable. It rises and falls, influenced by mood, circumstances, and other people's actions. If life is run purely on emotion, progress becomes inconsistent. Some days you show up, some days you disappear. That's when he realized something critical: emotion can inspire, but discipline sustains. Discipline is what remains when motivation fades. It doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't wait for the right mood or the perfect moment. Discipline shows up because it's committed, not because it's excited. He stopped allowing his feelings to decide his actions. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like it today?" he asked, "What needs to be done?" That shift changed his entire trajectory. When emotion was in control, reactions were quick and often regrettable. Anger led to words that couldn't be taken back. Fear led to hesitation. Comfort led to procrastination. Discipline slowed everything down. It created structure where chaos once lived. It introduced routine where inconsistency had ruled. And through that structure, confidence quietly grew. Discipline also teaches delay. It understands that reward doesn't always come immediately. Emotion wants relief now. Discipline is willing to wait. It's the ability to endure discomfort today for strength tomorrow. While others chased quick satisfaction, he chose long-term results. That choice required sacrifice, but sacrifice builds self-respect. And self-respect becomes a powerful motivator on its own. There were days when no one noticed his effort. Days when progress felt invisible. Emotion would have quit in those moments. Discipline didn't. Discipline kept the promise he made to himself, even when no one else was watching. That consistency compounded over time, turning small actions into unstoppable momentum. Discipline doesn't remove emotion, it controls it. It channels anger into effort, disappointment into focus, and pressure into performance. Instead of being ruled by feelings, he learned to lead them. And once discipline took the driver's seat, his actions stopped changing with circumstances. They became reliable, predictable, strong. Pain is unavoidable. Everyone encounters it, but not everyone uses it the same way. For some, pain becomes a stopping point. For others, it becomes an excuse. But for him, pain became information. It revealed where expectations were misplaced, where trust was given too freely, and where strength still needed to be built. Instead of asking why the pain happened, he asked what it was trying to teach him. Pain has a way of stripping life down to its essentials. It removes illusions and exposes truth. When comfort disappears, character shows up. In those moments, there is no room for pretending. Pain forces honesty, and honesty forces growth. He didn't run from that discomfort. He sat with it, studied it, and learned from it. That's when pain stopped being an enemy and started becoming a tool. Every disappointment carried energy. That energy could either turn into bitterness or become fuel. He made a deliberate choice. Rather than letting pain harden him in the wrong way, he let it sharpen him. Every setback added urgency. Every betrayal added awareness. Every failure added precision. Pain redirected his focus and refined his standards. Pain also built endurance. When you survive what you thought would break you, fear loses its power. The next challenge doesn't feel as heavy because you've already carried worse. Pain expanded his capacity to endure pressure without collapsing. It taught him how to stay steady when circumstances tried to shake him. That steadiness became a competitive advantage. There were moments when pain was the only thing pushing him forward, when motivation was gone and encouragement was absent. Pain reminded him why quitting was not an option. It became a reminder of what was at stake and what he refused to return to. Pain kept the fire alive when everything else went quiet. Over time, pain stopped defining him by what he lost and started defining him by what he built. It no longer represented damage. It represented distance traveled. Pain became proof of resilience, evidence of survival, and fuel for transformation. What once hurt him became the very thing that strengthened him. At some point, the need for approval starts to feel heavy. The constant checking. Did they like it? Did they notice? Did they understand? Becomes exhausting. He realized that living for validation is living on a leash. Your direction depends on applause, and your confidence depends on reaction. The moment that reaction disappears, so does your momentum. That's when he understood something deeper. Purpose demands independence. Purpose doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait to be understood. It moves forward whether people agree or not. As his sense of purpose became clearer, his attachment to approval weakened. He no longer needed everyone to agree with his path because he was finally aligned with it. And alignment creates a quiet certainty that validation can never provide. Validation is external and temporary. Purpose is internal and lasting. When he chased approval, every opinion had the power to distract him. Praise made him comfortable. Criticism made him defensive. But once purpose took the lead, both praise and criticism lost their grip. They became noise instead of direction. His focus shifted from being seen to being effective. Letting go of validation also meant letting go of explanations. He stopped trying to convince people who had already decided not to understand. Not everyone needs access to your reasons. Some people only want reassurance that your growth won't outpace their comfort. Purpose doesn't negotiate with that fear. It moves past it. There was freedom in this shift. Freedom from comparison. Freedom from performance. Freedom from needing to announce every step. Purpose allowed him to move quietly and confidently without waiting for acknowledgement. The work itself became the reward. Progress became the proof. When purpose outgrows validation, confidence becomes stable. It no longer rises with praise or falls with criticism. It stands on conviction. And once that happens, direction becomes unstoppable. He wasn't trying to be applauded anymore. He was trying to be aligned. And alignment always wins. When he stepped away, people assumed the story was over. They mistook distance for defeat and absence for failure. That's how surface-level thinking works. It judges the moment without understanding the process. But exits are often misunderstood because the real work doesn't happen on the way out. It happens after, in the unseen space where transformation takes place. A quiet exit is intentional. It's not dramatic, not emotional, not attention-seeking. There are no speeches, no explanations, no last words meant to impress. Just a decision to step back and recalibrate. While others announce their departure, he chose silence, because announcing an exit keeps you tied to the room you're trying to leave. He didn't want closure. He wanted clarity. During that absence, strength was being rebuilt. Perspective was being sharpened. Weak habits were being replaced with disciplined ones. He wasn't resting. He was restructuring. The time away wasn't empty. It was dense with effort. Every quiet day added weight to his return. Every unnoticed improvement stacked momentum. By the time people stopped mentioning his name, he had already outgrown the version they remembered. The world often celebrates loud beginnings and dramatic endings, but real power shows up differently. It returns without warning. No announcement, no countdown, just presence. And when that presence arrives, it speaks for itself. The return doesn't need explanation because results explain everything. That's why it feels louder. It contrasts sharply with the silence that came before it. People are always surprised by strong returns because they underestimate what happens in private. They assume nothing changes unless they can see it. But transformation doesn't ask for witnesses. When he returned, it wasn't with the same mindset, the same tolerance, or the same limits. He came back refined, grounded, and harder to shake, not louder in words, but heavier in impact. A powerful return also shifts dynamics. Conversations change. Expectations adjust. The same people who dismiss the silence now study the movement. The energy in the room feels different because he's different. Not reactive. Not rushed. Not seeking approval. The return carries authority because it was earned in isolation. And here's the truth: the louder the exit, the weaker the return. Noise burns energy. Drama wastes focus. But a quiet exit conserves strength. It allows growth to mature without interference. So when he finally steps back into view, it's not to be noticed. It's to be felt. So the next time you assume silence means weakness, remember this. Some people go quiet because they're done explaining, not because they're done becoming. What you didn't hear was discipline being built. What you didn't see was pain being converted into purpose. What you mistook for disappearance was preparation. He didn't move on to escape the past. He moved forward to outgrow it. And when someone returns with calm in their eyes, control in their actions, and results in their hands, understand this: that silence was never empty. It was loaded.